Today, we're diving into a medical condition that sounds like a complete paradox: empty nose syndrome. It's one of those things that really makes you realize how much our sense of reality depends on the tiniest, most invisible signals our body sends to our brain.
I mean, really think about this question. It's the absolute core of empty nose syndrome. Imagine feeling like you are constantly suffocating, just desperate for a good breath, but every doctor tells you your nasal passages are totally, completely clear. It just doesn't make any sense, right? How can you feel so blocked when there's literally nothing in the way?
All right, so to solve this puzzle, we have to go right back to the beginning. For most people who develop this condition, the story doesn't start with a blockage. No, it starts with a very surgery that was supposed to fix one.
Yeah, you heard that right. This condition is often an unintended and, thankfully, pretty rare consequence of a surgery meant to help people breathe better. And it specifically involves these little structures inside your nose called the turbinates. So, what on earth are they? Think of your turbinates as the super sophisticated climate control system for your nose. They're these curled, bony things covered in tissue, and they don't just let air pass through, they manage it. They make sure the air is warm enough, moist enough, and flowing at just the right speed for your lungs. They are absolutely essential for the feeling of taking a good, satisfying breath. Okay, so this chart might look a little complicated at first glance, but trust me, it's the treasure map for this whole mystery. It lays out a step-by-step chain reaction, showing how a physical change from a surgery leads to that baffling feeling of not being able to breathe. So let's walk through it together, starting with the simple physics of how air moves. And this is where things get really weird. It feels totally counterintuitive, right? But in the super delicate system of the nose, making the passage bigger can actually create a massive problem. It all comes down to how air behaves when you give it way too much room to move. So, it's this critical three-step process. First, the surgery takes out some tissue, which makes the inside of the nose wider. Now, basic physics tells us that if you make a channel wider, the fluid moving through it, in this case air, is going to slow down. And the slower moving air doesn't create as much friction against the nasal walls. That friction? It has a very specific name: wall shear stress. Wall shear stress. It sounds technical, but the idea is super simple. It's just the feeling of air moving against the inside of your nose. The best way to think about it is like the wind. You know the difference between a really strong gust that you can't ignore and a super gentle breeze you can barely even feel? Well, after the surgery, that strong gust is gone. The friction drops. And this, right here, is where the brain starts to lose the signal. Okay, but wait a second. The air is still physically there, right? It's moving in, it's moving out. But here's the thing: breathing isn't just about moving air. It's about your brain knowing that you're moving air. So what's the missing link? How does the physical airflow become a biological sensation? Well, the answer lies with these incredible little microscopic sensors that are hiding inside our nasal lining. You can think of them as the gatekeepers of our breathing sensation. They're the tiny detectors that are supposed to send a message to our brain saying, yep, confirm, air is coming in. Get ready to meet the unsung hero of your breath, the TRPM8 receptor. Now, these little guys aren't sensing pressure or force. No, they're sensing temperature. Specifically, they fire up and send a signal only when they feel a cooling sensation. They are, quite literally, the body's dedicated cool air sensors. And here it is. This is the big aha moment where all the pieces click into place. That slow, gentle breeze we talked about, it isn't strong enough to properly evaporate the mucus that lines your nose. And evaporation is what causes cooling, like when you get out of a swimming pool. So no evaporation means no cooling. And if there's no cooling, the TRPM8 receptors don't activate. They just stay silent. And if the brain's cool air sensors are silent, it comes to a terrifying conclusion: there must be no air. You'd think that's the whole story, but the fallout from the surgery actually goes way deeper. The problem isn't just about a lost sensation. The surgery itself kicks off a whole cascade of other issues that make this condition so difficult. See, the procedure doesn't just change the shape of the nasal passage. It removes vital tissue. This means, for starters, there's just less surface area of that important mucosal lining, which in turn means fewer TRPM8 receptors to begin with.
On top of that, you often get less mucus production and even a decrease in the blood vessels that keep all that tissue healthy. It's a total system-wide disruption of a very finely tuned biological machine.
So let's bring this all together. What empty nose syndrome really teaches us is a pretty profound lesson about perception. The physical reality that air is flowing through the nose becomes totally meaningless if the body can't sense it and report it back to headquarters.
There's this one line from the source material that just sums up the entire mechanism perfectly. The feeling of airflow isn't about the air itself. It's about a secondary effect, that subtle cooling from evaporation, which is then picked up by these incredibly specialized little receptors.
And there it is. The paradox is solved. Patients feel like they can't breathe because their brain is being starved of the one and only signal it uses to confirm that they are in fact breathing. The nasal passage is empty, but so is the inbox where that breathing confirmed message was supposed to arrive.
Empty nose syndrome really just pulls back the curtain on the fragile link between our senses and our reality. It makes you wonder, right? What other parts of our everyday experience are just interpretations built on tiny signals we never even knew were there?